Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome back to Zwift, a fitness journey. Today we're going to be covering more in-depth into specific sets of films. We are still going to continue with the franchise, at least for now. Today's discussion on that is Lord of the Rings. But first, before I set off on my ride, I've hit 3,000 drops. 300,000 drops, that is, and still have not used a single drop of that. I'm still sitting on the same 2-star arrow and weight frame and 2-star arrow and weight set of wheels. Now, it turns out wheels are cheaper than frames, and at level 9 there's not a whole lot that's available to me right now, but there's definitely some options out there that will save a bit of drops for later. Now, I don't know how big the impact will actually be out on the ride, but I've seen in that time trial that I did a little while back that having the wrong bike for that time trial made a massive difference. Quite a bit of time difference. So that could be one of the reasons why I'm just so much slower than everybody else is I'm still on the beginner setup. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and drop 191,000 for a 3-star arrow and 4-star weight. Now, I'm still in for a short ride today, as this is the second of the 2 weeks of just utter chaos in life, and so I'm just dealing with that, and I only have so much time available, so for the next couple of rides anyway, it's going to be the same, and maybe by the last ride this week I'll have enough time to do things a little more, well, normally. But let's go ahead and get to our discussion of Lord of the Rings. So we begin with my favorite trilogy of all time, which would be Lord of the Rings. Now, the Hobbit, let's just get that one done and over with and out of the way quite quickly here. That's a trilogy that I didn't care for as much, but it certainly wasn't bad. It just didn't live up to the hype of the Lord of the Rings in any way, shape, or form. But it was The Hobbit that I was first introduced to the world of J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, with Tolkien, I didn't know anything about them. I wasn't quite into fantasy. I liked fantasy as a kid, but not in a major way, not in an epic way. And I think timing-wise, things were a little off because, unfortunately for me, the time that I read Hobbit in school, I had a broken arm. And so I had a number of distractions going on, and timing was a little bit off. But I did get through The Hobbit in school. Had no idea that was Tolkien. That was at the time it was just a book that we covered in class. Ironically, that teacher is somebody that I still work with as a colleague now as an adult. I'm not teaching any longer, but I still coach at that same school, and she's still at that same school. She was a first or second year teacher back then, and is now quite close to retirement because it's been a long time since I was attending middle school, but that's the school that I coach for. Well, anyway, that's where I read The Hobbit. I remember which classroom I was in and everything. Well, I liked it. I certainly enjoyed The Hobbit, and I got a chance to watch the cartoon movie during that time, but I had missed some of the book in class and had to kind of catch up on my own, and then I had also, I think, missed some of the film for various appointments related to that recently broken arm. So rough little stretch for me there, and I think it had less of an impact as it probably would have, could have, or should have. My next introduction to the world of Tolkien was not until college, and that came as a 2-part thing. First off, Fellowship of the Ring not only had already come out, but it had just released on DVD. I hadn't even heard of it. I don't know how I had missed that, other than I suppose that I was in college and I didn't go watch any movies at all during that stretch in college. I never went to the theater. So I was busy with either, studying or drinking. One of the two, pretty much all the time. Or working to try to, get through college. Well, anyway, it was my sister, of all people, who reintroduced me for a second time in my life to the world of Tolkien, and wow. Wow. I had no idea. I was home for a weekend And the same day, it had released on DVD, and even my sister hadn't seen it yet, so she was long awaiting, and she bought the DVD the day it came out. And so she, with her kids and my parents and I, all sat down together and watched Fellowship of the Ring. And wow, by the end of that, I was hooked. By a week later, I owned the books. No, actually, I think I checked them out from the university library. I did not own them. I checked them out from the university library, and in my limited spare time, read through Lord of the Rings. So that's where my total fandom just kicked off rather suddenly. Now, as a child, I was somewhat into fantasy, but not in a major sort of way. Ever since then, though, ever since Tolkien, ever since reading the trilogy, man, oh man, have I been hooked. Now, from that point forward, Two Towers, saw it in theater. Return of the King, saw it in theater the day it came out, and then saw it another 3 times in theater, because my fandom just grew and grew and grew. And actually, I have a wonderful memory of a major snowstorm that shut everything down from Christmas on through New Year, one of the biggest we'd had in many, many years. And having a former high school friend who happened to live one building down in the apartment complex that my best friend and I were roommates in, coming over, and we were talking about Return of the King, which we had just watched in the theater the night before or something like that. I think the second time we had seen it. And my roommate and I were talking about it, and that friend came over for a visit and walked in, and we were kind of finishing up that conversation, and they're like, what are you talking about? And they hadn't seen any of the films, let alone read the books. And we ended up the next day binging Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, and then walking through the snow to the theater, which turns out was open but had only had like 10 people all day come, because you couldn't really get around town at all. And walking to the movie theater, mile and a half, 2 miles away through the snow, and going and watching the third time we went and saw Return of the King in the theater, the 3 of us, and it was so cool. It was a great experience. But I also have the opposite memory. The first time we saw Return of the King was the last showing on opening night, and every single showing was sold out. And of course, it's like a 10-hour movie, give or take 7 hours, and nobody wants to get up and walk out during this epic finale. And so everybody sits in the theater, and every seat is sold out. So, cramped theater full of people, and hours and hours and hours and very short gaps in between each showing led to, by the time we got into our showing, oh my goodness, it was like a high school locker room, which I wouldn't know what that's like as somebody who's been coaching sports for years and years. So, had the opposite experience in that one of, that's part of the reason why we went and saw it the second time. Was the first time we were a little distracted with some epic smells. Well, anyway, I'm such a fan, a diehard Lord of the Rings fan. Now, there are bigger fans out there than myself in virtually everything. I am a diehard fan. I'm very supportive, and I can certainly name characters and places and specific events, but there are the crazy diehard fans of virtually everything out there that can name even the smallest details of things. I can't go that far, not that strong, but I can certainly name my characters and events and place those things. And beyond the films, which I'm a big fan of, and talking about film versus the books, I love how well written the books are, and I love how true to the material Jackson was able to portray the films. But one thing that I really loved about it was that the one place that the books for me were totally lacking was every battle sequence. Every battle sequence was done and over with within a couple pages, and had very, very minute amounts of detail. That was what Tolkien just did not do well, period. Just terrible. The rest of the context was phenomenal. The world painting was unlike anything before it, and of course is now common mainstream, and the basis for most open world video games and things like that are all kind of taken from what Tolkien introduced the world to. And so that's amazing. But the battle sequences, so poorly written, just left you wanting massively. Jackson, that to me was what Jackson did so well, was because he kept true to the books. I mean, other than moving Shelob to from Two Towers into Return of the King, from the end of one into the beginning of the next one, outside of that, it made sense why you do that, but it didn't alter the material. It just changed where you put it into the sequence of the films, and really kept the timeline the same anyway, so it didn't impact anything. But what Jackson did so well was epic battle scenes. Holy cow. I'm such a fan of the Helm's Deep battle sequence. For me, that is probably second all-time on my list of great battle sequences. For me, first is going to be simple. That's the beach landing in Normandy during Saving Private Ryan. That's easy, greatest battle sequence. But second, I love that Helm's Deep sequence in the Two Towers. It was so awesome. Anyway, in Lord of the Rings, the diversity of the characters and what they offer, and the fantasy creatures. I mean, we have an entire genre to thank Tolkien for. Of course, not the first to come along, but just the way it was presented has everything since it. For me, one of the biggest moments in the Lord of the Rings is the character progression and struggle and just arc of Sméagol / Gollum. Just love not only the work that Andy Serkis did to bring that character to life, but just what Tolkien did with that character and the struggle that he goes through, and the way Jackson was able to then convert that into film worthy. That the humor, the struggles that he goes through, and just all of it coming together. I think there's no better character in Lord of the Rings than Gollum. Not that he's my favorite, but I think he's just got the best arc. Now, in terms of what Jackson did for that trilogy, I think it was nearly flawless. Nearly. Not quite. I think there's a couple areas there. I think almost every single actor was the appropriate actor and really brought their characters to life and worked out brilliantly, with, I'd say, probably only two exceptions. One that didn't quite do it for me was Sean Bean as Boromir. Now, I love Sean Bean as an actor. I don't know, I just didn't quite agree with the character portrayal as Boromir. Not poor acting, just, I don't know, the way that he and Jackson came together to do the character was a little off for me, and a little too villainous, and a little less of just the effects of the ring taking hold. He was a very unlikable character, period, and that shouldn't have been through the entirety. It should have been more through the impact of the ring. And for me, the other one is Arwen. Liv Tyler just didn't belong on that set. I think
almost every role she got because of who her dad is, and not because who she was as an actress. Not that she's a terrible actress. There is far, far worse out there than Liv Tyler, but there's also far better. Now, as for the extension of the Lord of the Rings in modern times, I'm always highly anticipating every new Lord of the Rings game release. They've dropped the ball in most of them. The Middle-earth ones, the strategy games, loved them. Absolutely loved them. Even the second one, I played so many hours on those two Middle-earth games and would be excited for a recent modern adaptation of those titles into something that fits the genre now. Of course, there are games, and there's the resurgence of like Age of Empires kind of games that are coming back. So I could see that being a thing again, but I don't know how playable it would be without kind of hitting onto modern play styles. Maybe not making it a top-down, but actually making it an active gameplay within 3D. That would probably be pretty cool to be involved in that as battle sequences and whatnot. For me, Shadow of Mordor was unfortunately on the disappointing side. So, on its surface, love the game. But ultimately, it's a button mashing, basically hack and slash, with you're just hitting the same sequence of buttons over and over and over and over and over again. That type of game, while for some that's great, I get so bored of that type of game these days. The last one that I really, really made my way through was one of the older Assassin's Creed games that I 100%ed, and then the next one I had gotten to 40 or 50%. I just couldn't do it anymore. And ever since that pure hack and slash, I get nothing but bored with those in a real hurry. And that's what Shadow of Mordor was for me. It was just that repetitive same thing over and over and over again, and it just gets old fast. If they had a more pure fighting tactical style to it, and it wasn't just that repetitive hit the same button sequence all the time, I would absolutely love to get back into the Shadow of Mordor series, because the second one I watched videos for it, awaiting the release, and super excited for new things and looking for it to do more, and found that it was ultimately just going to be the same game again with more story, and that just wasn't going to be enough for me. So unfortunately, the Shadow of Mordor, no, not that one, but those original Middle-earth games, I liked those a lot. So we'll see if they can bring something like that back or find a merge between the two. I'm still highly anticipating whatever's next, and there is a Gollum game coming out soon, though from the looks of it, I'll get it, guaranteed, but I don't know how much I'll get into that one. Lord of the Rings Gollum is supposed to be story-driven action-adventure, but it's mostly going to be stealth-based. And for those kind of reasons, the stealth games, I don't do terribly well with those. I mean, I want to be involved in the action, not just slowly going around trying to be unnoticed all the time. I already did that for real, in real life. I was in the army, I was a scout, that was my job. I've been there, done that. In these cases, in video games, I want the action. Regardless of some disappointing titles, it's always still something that I'm into. I love Lord of the Rings, and while I'm certainly not on the highest tier of diehard fans, I'm very much a quite committed fan of Lord of the Rings and the world that Tolkien has brought us, and always excited for new content related to those, and can't wait for more.
It was only 5 seconds, but felt good to be more tired, and you find a way to shave off some time. Just pushed, especially on the climbs. I was a little worse on the flat, but I made up my time pushing those climbs, and 0.2 of a second off 16th. That's what I was aiming for. I was looking at my times going, gosh, I'm just 5 seconds away from being 4 or 5 spots higher on the list, and That's my target. I was 2/10 of a second shy of what I was aiming for, but that's pretty good. That is more fatigue and still an improved time. 10K is all it was, but thanks, Brad. 10K is all it was, but that was still pretty tiring. And a lot of that just comes down to exhaustion in my body in general. Not as much rest as I would hope for due to just having a busy schedule and having to do late nights and early mornings just to get through my workload. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Decathlon Gamer, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like button. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.